Hello and welcome to the Cuyamaga Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, our volunteers, and supporting members, we really want to thank you for joining us today. The Cuyamaga Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human story, the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as an educational institution, we take an open approach, and so we invite scholars in related fields that help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration, and that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. On these Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics, from neuroscience and anthropology, archaeology, archaeoastronomy, eco-spirituality, philosophy, mythology, shamanism, ritual, the hero's journey, the roots of theater. It goes on and on and on, so much more, from the arts to the sciences. And we invite you to visit our website at cuyamangainstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and it's a nonprofit. Of course, we invite you to become a supporting member, and we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Cuyamaga Institute. Today, we want to continue this exploration into ancestral wisdom traditions, which is part of our mission. We want to look at the roots of human ancestry and researchers that show us how this all began, looking to Africa for our knowledge base. I mean, this is really one of the most exciting topics and things that we've ever hosted for Laura and I, and that is having access to this amazing document
in photos and films and books and their personal stories. And
so let me just tell you a quick thing. 45 years, 300,000 miles, 46 countries, 500,000 images later, we have this stunning archive of the rituals and the ceremonies of over 150 ethnic groups and their traditions across the different...
And I'm most proud that these are two women who went out and collected this. And by being women, they were allowed to sit in and have access and to be invited to document these very sacred ceremonies and rituals in very, very remote places. They had a privileged seat, and it is experiences and witness that we will never have. So they have been our eyes and our ears, and they're bringing back this big, huge, beautiful archive and their stories. And we have also with us Dr. Kelly Kirksey. And I first heard about Kelly when Angela Fisher and Carol Beckwith are our guests today. They have put together African Twilight as an exhibition. And our dear friend Barbara Cox is their agent for their photography, for putting together museum exhibits and books. And so we were there in Friday Harbor, where my sister lives and where Barbara lives, and we saw African Twilight, the exhibit, at the San Juan Islands Museum of Art. Stunning, stunning, stunning. This is also African Twilight's the title of one of their books, 17 books that they've produced. We have many of them gracing our shelves, and they're just a stunning, stunning collection of this. So it is such a privilege, Angela and Carol, to invite you here today. You're going to share your slideshow, your stories. Also, Kelly is here as well. And Kelly, you were in Friday Harbor as well, seeing this exhibit. So I just want to say welcome, all three of you. It's just a joy to have you. But let's start with Carol and Angela. Tell us just a little bit about why do two Western women set out to Africa, cameras in hand, on this long and amazing journey? What prompted this?
Well, I'm Australian and Carol's American, although we both now live in London and work in Africa. Well, I grew up in Australia, and I had an adopted father who was an Irish artist, and he really encouraged my passion for art, and he also encouraged my great desire to travel. And every school holiday, he used to take my brother and I camping to very remote places in Australia, into the Australian bush. And we never slept under a roof. That was a taboo. we always slept under canvas or under the open sky. And Tony would, as a ritual, keep an open fire burning the whole night so that we would feel contained and, you know, no wild animals would come and get us. He was trying to build my character, I think, when I look back. He was looking for me to be a strong and independent kind of person, and he decided the best things to do were to teach me chess and to learn to shoot a rifle.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a combo. Yeah.
So
In Australia, it makes sense. Yeah.
what I grew up with was the feeling that someone believed that I could do it. And I think that, you know, whenever you're in a very remote area and you're on your own, to be able to reflect into that.
Hmm.
I went and worked with the Aborigines when I was 21. And at that stage in the Northern Territory, they were settling Aborigines. They were stopping them being nomads and stopping them being on their wonderful walkabouts. And I felt very ill at ease about the harassment it was causing the Aborigines. They were very ill at ease having to do this.
Yeah.
And anyway, one night in the Northern Territory, I saw a documentary film on the Maasai of the Serengeti. And I looked at these beautiful ochred bodies with beadwork and the wonderful Serengeti plains with the golden grass and the blue surreal hills in the distance. And I thought, that's where I want to be. And I couldn't get it out of my system. And within 5 weeks, I'd left Australia. I got a flight to South Africa and I bought a car and drove it to Tanzania to find the Maasai. And this was a very big turning point in my life because once I was with the Maasai and amongst these beautiful beaded people with warriors also wearing lion's mane headdresses and ostrich feather headdresses, I knew I was in a living culture. I knew that I wasn't going to go home. I was going to make Africa my base.
Wow. Well, you heard the call to adventure and you answered. Yeah. And what is your story, Carol?
My story is that my father was my biggest influence in my future life. The first toy he gave me was a small round tin globe of the world, and I would not let go of this precious globe. It has held magic and mystery to me as a child. And then he put the entire World Book Encyclopedia on the lowest shelf of the library so that I could stand up and it was right at eye level. And I started pulling books out and opening them, and I was completely taken by traditional people all around the world, wearing feathers and beads and body paint and masks. I couldn't get enough of it. And fast forward, when I went to school, after a rocky childhood of not being terribly well, the headmaster called my father and they said they think there's something wrong with your daughter. She won't socialize with anyone. She stands on the edge of the playground and stares outward. And my father said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm looking at the horizon line because that's where all the people I read about in the World Book are living, and I want to go there." And I was determined to reach the horizon line. So again, fast forward, when I graduated art school in Boston, studying painting and photography, I won a traveling fellowship to go anywhere in the world I wanted to go for a
Oh,
year.
wow.
And I thought, I have four horizon lines. I want to explore them. The first was living in a Zen temple for 7 months in Japan, studying calligraphy with Zen at the roots. The second was through Thailand and Burma. The third to New Guinea before independence to witness the Sing Sing of 70,000 traditional people. And the final one, which is lasting forever, was arriving in East Africa at the end and trying to figure out, with 45 days left on the fellowship, how I could stay for 8 months. And magically and serendipitously, it was the Maasai that I was drawn to when I got to Kenya. I wanted to live with them. I wanted to tell their story. I wanted to learn their story. I wanted to celebrate them, and was blessed by meeting a Maasai warrior who had been educated in creative writing in Boston, Massachusetts, where I came from. And together we decided to collaborate. And that was the beginning of 45 years in Africa, and I hope another 45 to go.
Oh, wonderful. And Kelly, you are also a world traveler. Tell us a little bit about your quest and how this intersects.
How to intersect, yeah.
Yeah, well, first I want to just say thank you for creating this platform for us all to be here and to come together. I grew up in inner city Cleveland, and fortunate for me, I had an aunt, my dear Aunt Dot, that brought the world to me. That she would travel all over the world and she would bring back trinkets from every corner of our globe, and trinkets that came with stories and pictures and wonder that piqued my curiosity, that let me see that there was this amazing world beyond my backyard,
Hmm.
that life
Yeah.
wasn't just the parameters of my city or my state or my country, that it was so much life out there for me to explore. So she planted that seed. And as soon as I could get a plane ticket, raise money to get a plane ticket, I
Yeah.
was off. First, I explored uh, work out west with different Native American peoples and explored what was here in the country. And then I was able to just go to different places through my studies, from Venezuela to Africa. But it was really what happened at home in my
Mhm.
house with my mother, inviting people from other places into the world to say, we're all one. So that's where it began, that we're all one. And I have a responsibility to create a bridge,
Hmm.
to create a bridge.
Boy, my father always said travel broadens the mind, and I got to go on 4 overseas programs in college. I mean, wanderlust is just in the human species, is it not? That's how we migrated and colonized the globe. So,
Yeah.
and
Well, I was just going to say, and Kelly, and then Kelly had the same gift that we did in that seeing the
yes.
African Twilight show. How did that impact you? What did that say to you, Kelly?
Well, I'll say first that I have to give honor to my Haitian mother in law, Janine Gibbs Augustin. 25 years ago, she gifted me the 2 volume set of African Ceremonies. And
Mm.
this has been a part of my life for the past 25 years. And
It's
as a therapist, as a holistic psychotherapist, I often would just sit with the images, sit with the images and be inspired and be
mm,
guided of how to work with my clients in a organic, in an organic way.
Hmm.
And so my mother-in-law gave me the gift of African ceremonies and their work. And when I was invited to Friday Harbor to do some anti racism work and poetry, Barbara Cox, I ran into Barbara Cox and I was invited, you have to come and see African Twilight. And I said, oh, wow, I would love to see African Twilight. She said, well, come before your presentation. And I said, absolutely. So I walk into this museum, and there are the very books that my mother-in-law had given me 25 years ago. And she had just made her transition. She had just died months before. And I
Ah.
looked at my husband, and he looked at me, and it was as if my mother-in-law was saying, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the connection.
Mm.
I've been supporting you on the spiritual journey since forever. And
mm,
Yeah.
so seeing that exhibit, I saw myself,
Hmm.
I saw my community, I saw rituals that can help support us as an African American community. Of course, as a global community, but everything I talk about,
Mm.
I have to talk about from my own lived experience as a person of African descent.
Yeah.
And so these women inspired me so much. So it's been 25 years of being grateful that they had the courage to use their privilege and their power and their tenacity and their spark inside to document these rituals and ceremonies that we all need to know about for
mm.
our health and wellness and our remembrance, our great remembrance. So I thank you both so much.
Oh,
I want to
Then
say that that book won the United Nations Award of Excellence for, quote, vision and understanding the role of cultural traditions in the pursuit of world peace. So, yeah, congratulations on your work. So, we have a slideshow. We will see much of your journey through the 45 years and the many hundreds of thousands of miles. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're about to see with you, Carol and Angela?
Well, we're going to take you on a journey through highlights of our last 45 years of work, but based on our African Twilight book. And I think that we're going to show it, we're going to tell the story through images. So rather than jump the gun and tell you what it's about, we'll start right away.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm going
Now,
to take Laura and I also.
So we will go to a slideshow.
Yeah.
So,
we're going to start by sharing with you a very short video film introducing you to our work in Africa over the past 45 years.
Carol Beckwith and Angela Fisher have been photographing the peoples and cultures of Africa for the past 25 years, captivated by the immense variety and rich traditions of this mysterious land. They have travelled to some of the most remote corners of the continent, building relationships of deep trust and friendship with peoples who have rarely encountered the Western world. This has given them access to rituals and ceremonies normally held in secret, and their series of books has recorded and preserved these ancient traditions, even as they vanish. For the past 4 decades, Angela and I have dedicated our lives to recording the cultural traditions across the African continent. We've been completely taken by the diversity and the creativity of this world, and we've produced 17 books honoring these very important cultural traditions.
today, as Carol mentioned to you, we're going to focus on African Twilight, which is our last double volume book and is 14 years of fieldwork in Africa. But we're also bringing in some of the highlights of other books that we've done before African Twilight, particularly at Paul and Kelly's request. So it's a little bit of a potpourri. African Twilight was the first publication we made that actually had stories behind the scenes. So some of the stories that we've been through, we actually published in this book. Carol and I have been friends for a long period of time, and people sometimes think, I wonder where those two met. So we thought we'd tell you sort of fairly well on in the front of the story. We met in Africa at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was in 1978. And Carol was finishing a book called Masai, and her father, who is quite wonderful, came out from America to give her a birthday present. And he was very bright. He said, okay, the perfect birthday present is a balloon flight across Masai land so she can record Masai land from the air. And both the pilot of this flight turned out to be my brother Simon, quite by chance. Both Carol and Simon were young, very dynamic, and very attractive. And at 1,000 feet high in the air, Simon looked deeply into Carol's eyes and said, "You know, there's something I have to tell you."
And my heart was beating wildly.
And then, still looking closely into her eyes, he said, "You know, I'd love you to meet my sister."
My heart sank.
Simon had realized what an amazing potential kindred relationship we would have together. We were both lone travelers in Africa, and we were both passionate about recording traditional African ceremonies. When the balloon landed, Simon wrote the most effusive letter I've ever received about Carol, saying, "This girl is incredible. You have to meet her, and I only ask that you tell me when you meet her and exactly how the meeting went."
Angela and I met 1 year later in Nairobi at African Heritage Gallery at her traditional jewelry exhibition. We took one look at each other and we were totally disappointed. We'd each expected an Amazonian bushwoman in khakis and leather boots. But Simon had been so persuasive that we thought, let's give it a chance. Let's meet the next day. And he was absolutely right. We really were kindred spirits and nomads at heart. And within 1 week, we were photographing side by side at a Maasai warrior ceremony on the border of Tanzania. It was during this first week together that we shared a dream. We envisioned that one day we would create a comprehensive visual record of the most powerful ceremonies that move African people through life from birth to death. We were aware that these ceremonies were disappearing and both felt an urgency to record them before it was too late. Today, over 40% of what we've recorded no longer exists.
This map of Africa gives you an idea of the field work that we've been doing. We've been working in 46 countries in Africa, and there's a total of 54. So we've covered a lot of the continent, but we have still 9 left to do, which we intend to do very shortly. We've also been working with 150 different cultures and looking at those ceremonies that take you from birth to death. For African Twilight, we realized we had to travel deeper into Africa than ever before. At this stage, we needed to go into remote areas to find ceremonies intact. To do this, we traveled in different ways. At the top left-hand corner, you can see us in a dugout canoe, and we're traveling across a tributary of the Nile, looking for one of the Dinka dry season cattle camps. And on the right-hand corner, at the top, we're crossing the Danakil Depression, which is 410 feet below sea level and equally hot. We were looking for the Afar nomads who live right on the border of Djibouti and Ethiopia. In the center, we were preparing to look for the Soma, who lived in a very remote corner of southwest Ethiopia. In order to do this trip, we took a mule train of 15 animals over 10,000-foot mountains, packed with everything we needed for a 5-week stay. That means all our food, all our equipment, and this was probably one of the biggest treks we've done in Africa and a large one to organize. As we arrived in Somaliland, we were really surprised. A woman with a lip plate rushed out to greet us, and she was so emotional and so welcoming that we'll never forget this moment. And on reflection, looking back, we realized that we were the first white people she'd ever seen.
In the lower right, we're traveling on camelback in the Sahel of Niger with the Wadabe nomads. Once a year, they have an annual gathering of up to 1,000 nomads where the men perform charm and beauty dances and the women choose their boyfriends, husbands, and lovers. We traveled for 6 weeks and we lived off a calabash of milk a day. And whenever we'd get impatient, Chief Macau would say, "It's just up over the next sand dune." And 10 days later, we were still looking for the next sand dune. And when we really got exhausted, he would say, with proverbial nomad wisdom, "She who cannot bear the smoke will never get to the fire." And in this way, Angela and I mastered the art of patience and perseverance.
On each of the journeys, we keep detailed journals at night, and sometimes this takes a little perseverance. But the thing is, we're logging the photographs that we've done during the day as best we can, and also writing down any interesting experiences that happen to us. These are very highly illustrated, the journals, and we now have over 200 of them in our studio in London. This 200 cover our work in Africa.
And here's a look at the inside of the journals. We always have a calendar which marks what we're doing each day. We have maps in the lower left of areas that we're exploring, sometimes not on any map that you can buy in a shop. And because I was trained in art, I do a lot of drawings of cattle camps, of the beautiful jewelry collections that Angela's made, of masks that we're seeing. Anything that we can illustrate to enhance the experience that we've had, we put into our journals. Now, for the work we do, we have to be ready on very short notice to leave home base. And here's an example. We're doing field work in Madagascar, and we get a telephone call in the middle of the night from Tanzania saying that the Saleh Maasai warriors in 48 hours are about to undergo their ritual transition to elderhood. This happens once every 14 years. Well, Angela and I looked at each other, and this was like waving a red flag to a bull. We packed our bags, went straight to the airport, flew to South Africa, took the next flight to Kenya, drove 17 hours to get to the ceremonial site, and had to cross the Tanzanian border in the dark of the night because we didn't have visas.
When we actually climbed the escarpment into the ceremonial site, we couldn't believe our eyes. Every moment of the journey had been worthwhile. This was an incredible sight. It was a snake line of 900 warriors, all dressed in traditional red togas, and they have iron bells attached to their thighs that jangle as they stride. It was like a militant movement from years and decades and centuries ago, an extraordinary vision. We'd never seen anything like this before. And these warriors were headed for the Manyata, which is a ceremonial site where they're going to perform or be involved in 7 days of rituals.
A sea of red flags stretched as far as the eye could see into the horizon line. And for the Maasai, the color red symbolizes blood, life force, and the hot, fiery temperament of the Maasai warriors. The warriors gathered in the center of the Manyata, waving their red flags, symbolic of their unity as a generation. And at this point, the elders came up to us and they said, "We fear that this ceremony may never happen again. And we want you to record every single ritual that we undertake. And we want you to give it all back to us," which we did. At the peak of the ceremony, the warriors get so emotional that they fall into altered states called imboshona. And these states in some ways represent an epileptic fit. Their bodies go rigid, they foam at the mouth, and they're just chock-a-block full of emotion because of the importance of this ritual transition. Their mothers and sometimes other warriors grab onto them and wrestle them to the ground. And the mothers said to us, "If you put the young girlfriend of a warrior on his lap, he'll quiet down immediately."
The Saleh Maasai for us are the most beautiful of the Maasai warriors. They wear white jewelry, whereas other warriors are wearing red jewelry of other areas in Maasai land. And the jewelry is beautifully made. It's intricate in design and craftsmanship. Now, this passage from warriorhood to elderhood is a very poignant moment in a Maasai man's life. He's had this jewelry for 14 years. It's been his pride and joy and beauty symbol as a warrior. And in this very 14 days, this very 7 days of passage, he will have all the jewelry discarded and he will never wear it again in life. So this is a major turning point. And his long warrior locks, which he's so involved with, playing with them, dancing with them, he's emotionally involved with how he looks as a warrior. These are going to be shaved off on the last day by his mother. So he'll enter elderhood with none of these beautiful trappings that he had in warriorhood. This is the gathering on the last day, and you can see that all the warriors have had their heads shaved. And what's happening here is that they're being blessed by the elders, and then they're going to move into a different and more serious stage of life where they must settle down, they must have a marriage, have children, and they must also take great responsibility for the welfare of their community and their beloved cattle.
We'd like to show you a very short film made of this very ceremony to bring it to life for you. Recording courtship. Some of the most poignant moments of all of our fieldwork occurred during seasons of courtship. On the upper right, you see a picture of me with a male Wadabe charm dancer. And the Wadabe have quite a unique way of attracting women. If a man likes a woman, he winks at her. And if she likes him, she must lower her eyes demurely, but not all the way. At which point, the man twitches the corner of his mouth, indicating which bush he wants to meet her behind. For us, the Wadabe were probably one of the most romantic groups of people that we have ever worked with. And here's an example. At the end of one of our field trips, we're walking through the hot sand of the Sahel to our dusty Land Rover, and Chief Macau is walking behind us. And he's scooping up sand from our footprints and placing it in a small leather talismanic pouch that he wore over his chest. And Angela and I turned around and said, "Macau, what are you doing?" And he said, "If I wear your footprints over my heart, I know that you'll return to me one day." And we've returned 16 times since then.
The Wadabe are extraordinary. And so are the Soma. There's a photograph of myself with a Soma on the top left-hand side. Before we left, after our 5-week stay, 3 of our best Soma friends asked for a photograph with me, and they were extraordinary characters. We have Kola Holly, who is a painter, body painter, Chinoi, who was a stick fighter, and Muradit, who was a gold panna. And we thought we would ask Muradit what he felt we could give the Soma after our 5-week stay. We wanted to give the community something that would last and they could have it for the future and maybe it could help their lives. So we said to Muradit, what would the community like? Imagining that he would suddenly go off to the elders and they would sit under a tree and they'd discuss for hours whether they wanted a clinic or a school or what they would really like. And we were so surprised because Muradit didn't budge. He stood right in front of us, and then he looked very strongly into our eyes. And with this quizzical smile, he said, "Oh, we would all like to see your breasts." And Carol and I were taken aback a bit, and we thought, "Oh my God." And then we thought, okay, Beckwith and Fisher, think fast. You have to do this right. And then we suddenly thought that all the Soma women are naked from the waist upwards. And we had been wearing long sleeve shirts and camera jackets and obviously hiding the parts that they were curious about. So we thought, actually, it's a fair enough request. So we turned to Muradit and we said, fine, we're going to go ahead. And I think I'll let you hear the story from Carol.
So we invited Muradit into the privacy of our hut, leaving all 300 villagers outside pulsating with curiosity. And at the count of 3, we lifted our t-shirts for 5 long seconds. Muradit's eyes grew wide open with amazement. His mouth dropped open, and he raced outside to tell everyone what he had seen. He stood on a tree stump and delivered an 11-minute speech. And what he said in translation was that one of us had large, round, voluptuous breasts, and clearly this was a married woman with many children and absolutely taboo. But the other one had small, nubile, upright, pointy breasts, and clearly this woman was available to everyone. And at this point, our guide Zoga hurriedly packed up our mule train and spirited us up over the mountains to safety.
Say, we have never disclosed who is who, and we've been asked so many times. So that's one question we needn't open
we'll
up
leave
to the
you
world.
guessing.
Very well.
During our study of courtship in Kenya, we decided to visit the Ariel people who live in northern Kenya at the foot of Mount Poi, which is a beautiful sacred mountain and happens to be the largest monolith on the continent. We timed our journey to arrive once the courtship season had begun, and we do this by watching the rains. When the rains had finished, we knew that they could come together. And when we arrived, they were already together, and we were so taken by their seductive beauty and their very alluring ornamentation. These wonderful Ariel young people had chosen red roses from the marketplace to use during the courtship period. When a young girl is ready for courtship, her mother actually builds her a separate hut. It's near to her hut, but it's a separate hut where she feels that she can meet potential new boyfriends. And when a young suitor goes to meet her, he will take a necklace, a colorful necklace that you can see here on top of her own red bead necklaces. He offers it to her as a gift. And if she accepts it, this couple is actually formally proclaiming that they're an ongoing, going steady couple in the Ariel society.
Ariel warriors have a tremendous flair for beauty, and you often see them sitting in the shade of an acacia tree, decorating their coiffures with all kinds of things, from eagle feathers to colorful pom-poms to plastic and silk roses, and even adding toys and little trinkets they find in the local market to make themselves irresistible to the female eye. And here you see a junior warrior, recognizable by his black cap hairdo, tressing the hair of a senior warrior who's about to enter the courtship dance.
And what he's doing is he's adding in long sisal fibers to lengthen the hair and then coloring them with ochre pigment mixed with butterfat. When all the warriors and the girls are ready to come together, fully decorated, they play, they dance, and above all, they seek out the invaluable going steady relationship.
The Turkana are the northern neighbors of the Arial. And Turkana men say of a young girl, it's the things she wears that make her beautiful. And they don't even consider her adorned until her necklaces reach from the chest to the chin.
The Wadabe of Niger, one of our very favorite groups. Angela and I have spent nearly 2 years living with the Wadabe. We've learned their languages and we've made many studies of their traditions. And once a year, as we mentioned earlier, they come together in large numbers to perform courtship dances. They perform charm dances, beauty dances. The very first dance on arrival is the welcome, performed in small groups. And when the men perform the charm dances, they form very long lines and they make themselves up elaborately. They have a specific criteria for beauty. They say that a man must have beautiful white sparkling eyes because marriages are made from the power of the eyes. And a man must have a long aquiline nose, perfect white teeth, pale skin enhanced by makeup. And here he is performing in front of a bank of up to 500 female judges. Now, the judges are able to pick out their boyfriends, their lovers, and their long-term husbands from these very events. Now, if a charm dancer can hold one eye still and roll the other in and out, he's considered irresistible to his female judges. And the man in the center was clearly the winner. By the end of the dance season, he'd acquired 3 wives. Angela and I were very touched by the fact that this picture won the Best Picture of the Year award in a competition held by American Photography magazine in the 1980s. And we were convinced it was the eye-rolling, pulling power of the middle dancer that won over all the judges in the magazine.
And those are 3 separate categories: lover, husband, and boyfriend.
They are indeed.
Yes. Yes, they have a wonderful free kind of feeling about relationships in life that we probably all could learn from and have learned from. One of the things that Carol and I've really enjoyed in Africa is working with brides, and we realize how extraordinary the creativity is in Africa with all this beautiful adornment and all the beautiful attire they have at wedding time, and also the great variety of designs that you find across the African continent.
Here you see a Barabeg bride from a cattle-rich family in Tanzania, and she's wearing an amazing collection of coiled and hammered brass jewelry. Angela and I realized that this was uncanny. This was so similar to the gold jewelry designs that we'd seen in ancient Egypt that we thought maybe these designs were carried along the trade routes from the Nile Valley into East and Central Africa.
This is an Afar bride from the Danakil Depression, and where you saw us traveling by vehicle when we talked about ways of traveling. She has a stark beauty which really reflects the environment she comes from. And we were taken by the fact that she just wanted simple beads to really show off her beautiful natural self.
And this is a Rashida bride from Eritrea. She's been veiled since the age of 4 years old. And at the time of her marriage, her mother makes her a beautiful veil, hand embroidered with silver threads.
And this is a Fulani bride from Mali. And this photograph was actually taken in the market. In the old days, women would feel comfortable wearing this kind of jewelry to the market. Her gold earrings and her amber beads, because they're of such a size, are actually reflecting the wealth of her family, the cattle wealth of her family.
And here you have a Maasai bride with her beautiful adornment, her mobile headpiece, and her many collar necklaces. But if you look closely at this photograph, there's a tear running down her eye. She is so sad to be leaving her mother and going such a long distance to her husband's new home. And here you have a Zulu bride wearing a beautiful flaring headdress. In the olden days, this headdress would be made out of the hair of her mother to show the bond between mother and daughter and to celebrate her wedding.
Wow.
Some of the most exotic hair ornaments came from Mali, and here you see a Sonrai bride with a conical hairstyle, and it's embellished with silver coins and gold filigree pendants, and it's absolutely reminiscent of hairstyles of the 16th century Sonrai Empire.
And here we have an Ojukwu bride from Ivory Coast who's wearing a magnificent array of gold head pendants, and she is even wearing gold dust makeup on her face. This bride will be put on a throne in the center of the village for all to admire her beauty and, most importantly, her husband's significant financial achievement.
And these are Petty Queens from South Africa. We wanted to include them because they are really so extraordinary and really honored for the jewelry that they do with beads. They have the most beautiful beaded coils around their arms and hips, and these actually symbolize voluptuous rolls of flesh that petty men love to admire about the Petty Queens.
Now, the very first trip that Angela and I ever made together was in 1980 to visit the Wadabe nomads. And here is Chief Macau. He was our host. He was our wonderful friend of many decades. When Chief Macau first met us, he took one look at our Western clothing and heard our names and said, "This won't do. We really need to redress you, and we would really like to rename you and give you a little bit more style in our eyes." So we said, absolutely, of course. And Angela became Julama after a beautiful, tall Wadabe woman. And I became Fatima after the wife of the Prophet Muhammad.
And 10 years later, here is Fatima, surrounded by Chief Macau on the left and Bango on the right, Bango being Chief Macau's brother. At this stage, Carol and I were traveling with Chief Macau and his family. And one night when I was lying on a mat on the sand, I suddenly felt somebody on top of me, and I thought, what is happening here? Because the Wadabe are very gentle, and you don't ever have a feeling of anything happening. And then the figure got closer, and I realized it was Chief Macau. And I thought, wait a minute. And he said, Julama, Julama, I need you. And I really didn't understand. And then again, Julama, Julama, I need you. And I was very mystified by this. And then suddenly he said, Julama, I need you. I urgently want to write a letter to Fatima's father to ask how many camels he requires for her hand in marriage.
And 2 months later, my father wrote back 9.
The Omo River is one of our very, very favorite places. It's a remote corner of southwest Ethiopia where some of the most ancient forms of body beautification can still be seen in Africa. There are 16 groups of people that live in this area, and one of the ones we've worked with the most are the Kara, and we manage always to go to the Omo River during courtship season. This is a time when men take off a period of leisure and they go down to the banks of the Omo River every morning to paint their bodies with a chalk paint, and they design the paint onto the body in a way that they believe will attract the opposite sex. And we photographed the Kara, and they were thrilled. They loved to look at the digital screen on the back of the camera. and they would get great pleasure admiring themselves because they've never seen themselves. There were no mirrors at this time. So they would see themselves and think, wasn't this wonderful? And they get energy to go off during the day and have courtship rituals. And then the following morning, they come by our tent early in the morning and pick us up and say, you have to come, we're going to paint our bodies again. And then we'd record all the new designs, which they, of course, were over the moon to have more designs recorded.
The Kara have a remarkable way of being able to layer paint. Now, as you know, the paint dries very quickly, so they have to start out with almost a Zen concept of beginning, middle, and end. They have to achieve the end before the paint is dried. When the first layer is dry, they usually put on a series of dots. And when we asked them why they did this specific pattern, they said, oh, this resembles the spotted plumage of our favorite bird, the guinea fowl. The younger generation of Kara were still painting themselves with chalk and ochre, but started to add in flowers and fruits and adornments to enhance their presentations. Here are the young boys, and here are the young girls who have really gone all out. On the left, an abundance of flowers into a headdress, in addition to beautiful face painting and her earplug. And on the right, an upside down bunch of hanging millet stalks, which is one of their staple foods, to make a kind of magical coiffure around her eye designs.
The Kara always wanted Carol and I to join in the ceremony. They would always say, come to the river, now we're dancing and you've got to join in the dancing, etc. So we did, and we became closer and closer friends, and here we are on the riverbank having our bodies painted with chalk paint. But it was upsetting them because they couldn't get these courtship designs to show up on our pale skins. So we didn't say anything. And then one evening, Carol and I were drinking hot chocolate. And these Kara, very smart, they recognized the hot chocolate drinking powder. And they looked at each other, and one of them must have stolen it, because the next morning we arrived and they'd already prepared a paint of dark brown chocolate pigment, and they got us sitting down and they didn't say anything, and they painted our bodies with brown pigment paint, and it looked amazing and everyone went crazy, and that was the beginning of the brown pigment paint designs
and the end of the hot chocolate. Now, Kara men paint their bodies to attract the female eye, but very unlike the men, the Omo River women scarify their bodies to attract the male eye. And these are quite elaborate scarifications and quite painful, but they do it very proudly, and they love the designs, and every woman has her own design. The Kara explained to us that they don't like to kiss, but rather a man is aroused by touching the textured skin of a woman's torso. A little bit of personal detail in there. When their bodies have been painted, the men's spirits are lifted, and they come leaping forward in front of the admiring women, showing off their beautiful chest paints and, of course, their impressive high leaps. We'd like to show you a very short film that we've made of Kara and Nyangatom dancing, courtship dancing.
The Dinka are some of our favorite people in Africa. And we've spent many years with them before the Civil War in the 70s, and afterwards, immediately the border opened in 2006. We believe that of all the pastoralists in Africa, the Dinka are probably the most devoted to their cattle. Every year during the dry season, the young people take the animals down to the river Nile, to the swamplands to graze. And at this stage, they live in cattle camps. They graze the animals during the day, and at night they come back into the cattle camps, tether the cattle, and sleep with them around smoky dung fires, which keep all the insects at bay. And they sleep the night in this beautiful haze of smoke as the sun is setting. When a young boy becomes of adolescent age, he acquires a namesake ox. And this is a very important moment because at this stage he's not only named after the ox, but he believes that this animal is an extension of his personality, that he and the animal are actually one person. So for the rest of the life, he's going to take this animal with him. And we love to watch young Dinka boys taking their animals when they went courting. So they would arrive with the boy beside his animal, and he would be imitating the animal's horns with his arms in the air, and he would be showing off the beautiful lyre-shaped horns, and he would be then singing songs to the girl, and he would sing the words like, "My ox is magnificent," and he is both very big and he's both very virile. He's a magnificent beast, and the more he talked about his ox, we realized that he was actually promoting himself to the young girl. The Dinka grow up indicating their passage in life or indicating their stage in life by beaded corsets that are color-coded. The Dinka man on the left is wearing a corset of red and green, which indicates to a girl that he's ready for marriage. His corset is large too. It's a big corset, so it indicates that he comes from a wealthy, cattle-rich family. The girl on the right is wearing a corset that also indicates that she's ready for marriage, but the height of it is very specific, and this very high corset reaching above her head is showing to a young suitor that her family requires up to 80 head of cattle for her hand in marriage.
The Himba of Namibia. Angela and I felt very privileged to meet the most renowned Himba healer and exorcist named Kachambia. And we felt even more honored when Kachambia invited us to accompany her for 3 weeks of circling through villages in Himbaland in order to perform healings. Here you have Kachambia with her assistants who follow her throughout her work. In one of the first villages we came to, we saw an astonishing sight. She found 3 women who had been possessed by a lion spirit. They were on the ground, they were growling, they were howling, their knees were bleeding, they were scratching it. They were completely taken over. And what had happened is that these were 3 co-wives of a man, their husband, who had been killed by a lion and taken off into the afterworld. It was believed that he sent the spirit back into the village to bring his 3 wives to come and join him. Kachambia faced a very big challenge of how to exorcise the lion spirit from these 3 women. She took out her healing rattle and started shaking it, and they actually started biting at the rattle. And eventually, with time and patience and tremendous power, she was able to pull the lion spirit out of these 3 women and take it into herself, where she would traditionally exorcise it from her own body. But it was so powerful that she could not exorcise it from her body. And she whispered to us after a very long time, "Help me get back to the ancestral fire." The ancestral fire is a fire that's kept alive in every homestead that represents the healing power of 3 generations of ancestors, all healers.
We got Kachambia back to the generational healing fire, and for 7 hours she wrestled with the lion spirit inside her body. It just wouldn't leave. And finally, at 2 in the morning, Kachambia started to relax. And as she relaxed, we saw a flash of light bounce off her forehead into the night, after which she lay down on the ground and fell asleep. We imagined that that was the lion spirit leaving her body. When we got home many months later, we took our film to be processed, and to our absolute amazement, we had caught the light leaving the side of her face in one of the images, and wondered if this wasn't the moment when the lion spirit left her body.
Oh, man.
The spirit world. This is taking us into the spirit world. In West Africa, we had a lot of opportunity to look at the spirit world. And we were very fortunate enough to travel with a voodoo initiated priest called Godfried. And Godfried took us further and deeper into the spirit world than we'd ever been before. In Burkina Faso, he introduced us to a society, a secret society of masks, who perform rituals to ensure a good cultivation of the land. In this part of the world, people often believe that the spirits of the world control their life, and these are the spirits of the ancestors, the spirits of the bush, and the spirits of the animal kingdom. They also believe that when you cultivate the land and cut the surface of the earth, that you destroy its natural equilibrium. And at this stage, masks must be asked to dance so that they can appease the spirits, so the spirits will restore the balance of the land and ensure that the cultivation will succeed.
At the age of 4 years old, a boy is taken into a secret society of masks in order to learn how to let go of his human identity and dance the mask. In other words, he's going to be channeling the spirit world through his body, but no longer as a human being. Our wonderful guide, Godfrey, who had been a Vodun priest, said to us that when the masks channel the power of the spirit world, they are actually able to perform superhuman feats. And Angela and I made a short film to try to bring the power of the spirit world that we saw to life for you today.
So Carol and I have been recording Africa and traditional society since the 1970s. And in the beginning, we were fascinated about captivating beautiful images. It was a complete passion to captivate beautiful images. And then as our journey continued, Africa began to captivate us. It began to capture us. And we had our eyes open to its extraordinary creativity and to the many ways that people lived a life, the many different lifestyles, and to the ancient values of the traditional cultures, which have really impacted our life. We realize now how much we've learned from Africa and how much our lives have changed since we've spent many years there close to traditional people. In particular, we've learned the importance of community, not only for the security, but for enveloping people, for enveloping each individual to give them a feeling of belonging and support. We also realize the importance of elders being part of the community and taking an active part in every day, sharing their wisdom and their knowledge. And the value of rites of passage, which literally help define life, help define the next stage you're going to in life, and in a way, ease the process of growing up and give us less anxiety as we change from one stage of life to another. Also important are the ceremonies and rituals that occur all the time during the year and keep us in balance with our environment and in touch with our own spirit worlds.
Each time we return from Africa, we realize how many of these values have been lost in the Western world. Due to the chaos and conflict in the world today, we feel it is ever more important and to understand and to take to heart the messages that come from these ancient cultures.
One of the most important things we've learned, in fact, probably the most important thing, is that although we appear very different to one another, I mean, some of us are naked, some of us are dressed, some of us are scarified, some of us are veiled, some of us are lip-plated, and some of us are painted. We are all the same human beings. We're all the same human beings, and we have similar human emotions and human needs. Understanding each other's cultures and celebrating our similarities and also absorbing our differences, we believe is not only essential for the evolution of mankind, but paramount to the pursuit of world peace.
Each time we publish a book, we take it back to Africa to share and to give to all those friends who have helped us make it. When we completed African Twilight, we decided to firstly take it back to Chief Macau on the edge of the Sahara Desert. Chief Macau had seen perhaps 2 or 3 books in his entire lifetime. He opened the book and he studied every page meticulously. And when he finished, he looked up at us and said in his language, "This is Magani Yegitata," which means medicine not to forget.
Oh my goodness.
Medicine to never forget.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Powerful.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. So many comments. I want to hear from our audience. I want to hear from Kelly. But I guess you were 9 cows, Carol. You were a bargain compared to 80 as a standard bride price. Yes, maybe your dad did or didn't know that. I can't decide.
What was that, Carol? Yeah.
Well, it was the only time my dad let me down.
You sold me. Too cheap.
Oh my!
Well,
I also want to say
go
that
ahead.
in seeing a spirit in seeing the departing lion spirit from that medicine woman, there are a few accounts that we have heard of people witnessing that. One was from the very well-known anthropologists Victor and Edith Turner, who also sat at ceremonies in Africa, and they saw a healing, and they saw what they described a miasm, kind of a cloud, dissipate from the patient. Another one happened in Australia with our good friend and member of our community, Louise Gilmore, who was described as being out in the outback with an elder, auntie, they called her, and they had brought a group of Westerners out to very remote, where the caves with columns and the petroglyphs underneath.
I forget the name.
Yeah, and she said that they were there doing ceremony, and they were sitting around the campfire, and they noticed fairy lights off in the distance, just fairy lights. Of course, there's no electricity out there. There's nobody else out there. And they said, Auntie, what is that? And she goes, oh, the spirits like to come. You've called them with ceremonies, so there they are, witnessing. So, I mean, what extraordinary adventures, and thank you for sharing them. By the way, tell me your own interpretation of the clip with the raffia masks head to toe, dancing, twirling around the plaza. They lift up the skirt, there's nobody inside, and yet it had been twirling on its own. How do you explain that?
I think we like to leave our Western baggage behind when we go to Africa and open up to all possibilities, even ones we hadn't imagined. And it's something that the shaman Malidoma Some said we in the West lack. He said we see things in a 180-degree direction, and there's another 180 degrees, which is all the magic, the din, the voices of the spirit world that they see all the time and we rarely see. So we thought, let's suspend disbelief. Let's go along with what everyone feels and get deeper into it and understand how and why they feel that way. And then you begin to understand a lot more about their culture than saying, well, this is clearly not possible.
Thank
So even though people expect us to say that as Westerners, we don't say that. We
Thank
say
you.
everything is possible. And why not let go and look into areas that are dark and shadowy that we've never looked at before and see what interesting light and illumination we can find.
And appreciate the gift of broadening our bandwidth, of broadening our spectrum of perception.
The full spectrum of the human experience. I mean, that full spectrum being developed and being honored and experienced. And,
to see with our inner eyes, our spirit eyes, as well as our physical eyes.
I mean, you can't even properly acknowledge the gift that you've given to us by sharing this work with us, spending your lifetime of adulthood on the road and doing all the work that you've done. The power of the imagery, and the fact is that the foundation of our institute with Dr. Felicitas Goodman, she recognized the power of masks. She recognized the power of ritual, the power of dance, the power. She taught this from the very beginning, and stepped outside of standard anthropology and opened a doorway to saying, where can this take us? Where can this lead? What is the next chapter to the human story? We need to go back. We don't need to go forward. We need to look back at the ancestors. We need to look back at the wisdom traditions of old and see what knowledge base is contained within it for us to learn. Because Western culture, like you mentioned, is only experiencing half of that imagery most of the time, that 180 degrees. That 360 experience that you're exposing us to by through the eyes of the African culture and all these different countries and through the dances and ceremonies and rituals. Speechless.
Well, also, we don't need the intellectual understanding.
Right.
Right.
We don't.
We need to show
really
up,
don't.
participate in the rituals, have an open heart, have reverence, and that spirit magic works. We don't even need to define what the spirits are. They're present in our lives. The ancestors are present. Let's hear from Kelly.
Yeah, I'm going to add
As well?
Kelly. Hello, Kelly.
Kelly, your response.
Oh, my response is just deep, vast gratitude. I mean, watching the dancer, seeing the images, I get a visceral feeling in my body. It's like I feel those movements, and just beholding it is healing. Beholding it is healing, and I think that's something that's so critical for us to share this information and to take the ceiling off of our our brain and say there's so many other possibilities that exist, and that's a part of our DNA. But we need the activation of that blueprint that's inside of us, that it's there. And so these images help to shake free of just some of the ways that we've kind of westernized ourselves out of community, out of ritual, out of uh, trusting in those things that, we can't see. So this is,
Had a very similar feeling when we'd spent about 8 days with a group of voodoo worshippers who followed Koku, who was a war god, and they were performing at a Kokuzan ceremony on the beach in Ghana. And Carol and I would write at night all the incredible, what we felt of were superhuman feats that happened during the day. When people take on the spirit of Koku, they become completely uh, trance like, and they can perform superhuman feats that we were watching and we were photographing, but we just couldn't believe it. And they would be rolling on prickly pears, and the prickly pears wouldn't hurt their skin. They would put razor blade cuts on their arm, and it wouldn't hurt their arm. They'd swallow fire. They'd walk up on trees right up to the top of a tall palm tree and walk out on the tendrils, and they wouldn't fall. And we were looking at, and we would look at each other and we'd say, "Did you get it? Did you photograph it?" And then something else would happen behind you, and someone else would be carrying a huge deity on their head and would be completely out of control. And it was so extraordinary. And we would sit on our own at night and list them all. And then we met Malidoma Some, who the shaman who wrote the foreword to African Ceremonies. And we said to him, "Could you explain this one thing to us? Can you explain how it's possible for these human feats to be, carried out like this?" And he just said to us, as Carol was saying, "You're only in touch with 180 degrees. You, Carol and Angela, have traveled more of Africa than I've ever met anyone. Even an African hasn't traveled as much of Africa. But you don't hear the din of the spirit world. You're traveling and you're very close to people, but you haven't, because of your upbringing, you aren't born with this enormous opening into the spirit world." And his biggest invitation to us was, "I will take you into the sacred forest, and we will stay there together, and then it will start to change." And unfortunately, Malidoma Some died. And we haven't done that journey, but we hold that as a knowledge that we've still got a lot to learn.
I'd like to add one thing to where Angela left off in the Vodun ceremony of superhuman feats. Just after that ceremony, we were told that in Seko, Togo, there was a voodoo healing hospital that exclusively faced and took on cases that were beyond the reach of Western medicine. So we asked to go there and to meet the chief priests who were in charge. And they explained to us that in our hospital there are 3 shrines. The first one deals with emotional illnesses, whether it can be mental breakdowns or it can even be love sickness. But it directly faces that through the dictate of voodoo. The second one deals with physical ailments. So this is what's beyond Western medicine and Western science, but it's the belief that it can be cured. But the third one was the most astonishing of all. The third one is guided by Hevioso, who is the most powerful thunder god in West African mythology. And this thunder god takes on cases of killing, punishment, and making war. And it takes these cases on to transform those instincts into positive procreative power. I mean, that is extraordinary. Do we have any medical institute that can take on those 3 in the guise of medical cure, take on those 3 huge, destructive, world-changing
Even to see it
problems?
as an illness that needs help, right? That needs
People think
correction,
of voodoo, which
transformation.
is called voodoo, and as pins and dolls and zombies in the outside world. It is so different than that in West Africa. It's so much about ethical, moral, physical ways of living well and living healthily. And in Benin itself, when you do a breakdown of religions, you usually have Catholicism and Islam and then other ethnic ones. 90% Voodoo, and then Islam, and then Catholicism. So that you can see how hugely important it is as a religion and how misunderstood it is.
Yes, and
It's
it's
also
been vilified.
it's
It's
been
Yeah.
it's
vilified.
been vilified, and it's
Yeah.
been taken out of the hands of
Mm.
the people that were kind of meant
Yes.
to
Yeah.
cure it. I mean, I have relatives from Haiti that were punished if they went on holiday and listened to the drum. Like if they even reported that they heard the drum, they would
Yeah.
be punished and have
Yeah.
to do penance for that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I was wondering during your portrayal of this beauty and the richness and the community cohesiveness and the magic of all this, what the disservice that the West has done to its portrayal of Africa and its cultures. Like, hello, this was here all this time. How could you not go record this? It took two beautiful women out there to record this. What is wrong? How did it take so long for us to see this? And I think you've just answered in part that question, which is to see that, we'd have to see the cosmology, we'd have to see spirit, we'd have to see the other missing half of our equation in the West.
Right.
We'd have to see the magic, we'd have to see the consciousness, we'd have to see the beyond. And the West is not prepared to do that. I think it's softening. I think we're growing. There's many in the West who want to bring that in because we live it, we see it, we know it's there. But it's the whole package, right? You can't just see the beauty without the depth of the meaning, without the lived experience, without what it means.
Right.
And we have some growing up to do here in the West, don't we? We have some reclaiming to do for
And the
this,
Institute is
to be
making
whole
wonderful,
people.
big, giant steps in that direction.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And there's another element to it. There's anthropologist Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a book called Dancing in the Streets. And her hypothesis is that a lot of the mental illnesses that we discover and that we see in the Western culture doesn't exist in a lot of these indigenous cultures because they dance, they celebrate, they do ceremony, do ritual. They don't wait 4 times a year to do a celebration. They don't just do Christmas and Halloween and whatever. They do every single week. There's something. It keeps the tribe healthy. It keeps the mind clear. It keeps us connected to something deeper within ourselves that's so important. And I wanted to acknowledge Barbara also because she just recently passed away in the last few
Barbara
weeks.
Ehrlich, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy.
most indigenous cultures are moving those energies through the body, are connecting with nature to discharge anything that feels like discomfort or dis-ease. They're going into their community and working with their elders to come back to a balance. But the magic and the medicine of Africa as a continent could not have been shared because the West was using Africa and its resources and its people as free laborers. So how can you say this is a beautiful, magical land when we're enslaving the people?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
complete contradiction. So we now get to open it up and share it and
Yes.
share it.
We
And
feel
it's time.
very much
It's
the
time to
same,
heal
and
that.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons that Carol and I have spent so many years recording traditional cultures is that they're so rich and so creative and they run so deep. And you realize, as you were saying, people are connected to community. People are also very connected to the environment and they're connected to the animals. And it's
And the
like
ancestors.
and the ancestors. And you're a human being, but you're a human being with all of this impacting you. And in a way, what we're feeling of life in Africa, particularly amongst traditional cultures, is that there is so much that one can offer the world, so much that one can see that's extraordinary, just textiles, jewelry, and adornment, but so much in the way of spiritual journeys and so much in the way of different ways of living a life, etc., that we felt very sad that the knowledge of Africa for many years was the knowledge of, as you say, slavery, but also the knowledge behind the news headlines when people would think of Africa as continent of poverty, continent of famine, war, and they talked of dark Africa, and we're thinking, wait a minute, this is much lighter than most of the existences that we have, and these people, when we arrive in Africa, we slow down a bit, but do we have fun? We have a lot of fun, and people have very much less in the way sometimes of material possessions, but life seems to be very enjoyable. And we think to ourselves, the simpler the better. Just simply
Absolutely.
just go and just live at a slightly more simple pace and live with fewer possessions, and the act of being and surrounded by a great community is an extraordinary feeling.
And all the problems you just named are the ones the West visited upon Africa
Yeah.
for the most part. Yeah.
Let's bring in some additional questions and comments. Fred Smith, who's going to be coming up as a guest, as
In
our
2 weeks.
as our Vedic scholar and beyond.
Who's also witnessed remote ceremonies that most Westerners have not seen. Hey, Fred.
Thank you. Yes, I really enjoyed seeing all of your videos. I have at least 108 questions here, but I will. I wrote some of them above if you have the chat stuff there. But other than that, or besides all that, I would like to ask. Gosh, well, still, I want to know. Like my first question that I wrote there above: whatever happened to the 3 co-wives who, with the lion spirit? Did they ever remarry? Whatever happened to them?
Oh,
Well, they
Then I'll
were,
ask another question. But
they were released of the lion spirit through Kachambia. And I think we need to go straight back to Namibia to get the answer to that question. And we're all ready to fly right away. Because we haven't been back since that time, but we've been in touch with Kachambia. We know where she is, and we know that she's continuously doing this extraordinary work of healing and exorcism. People really believe in her. Just her presence in a village makes a huge amount of difference to the sense of well-being and the lessening of anxiety when she's around.
well, that kind of answers a lot of what I asked, because presumably they were just 3 sort of normal co-wives without these sorts of positions as shamans and so on before the husband was taken off by the lion, right? And then this happened. And now she's looked at in this way. Is this true, or was she always like that?
Kachambia?
The
Was
medicine
she-
woman, you mean?
Sorry.
Yeah, the medicine. Was she a medicine woman before
yes.
Oh,
the
yeah.
husband was taken
Yes.
away, or was
Yeah.
it only as a result of this?
No, she always has been, and she was actually the first female healer amongst the Himba. And her father was Chief Vetamuna, who was an extraordinary African chief, who really was the chief of all of Himbaland. But before her, there were only male healers, so she's
Oh.
quite remarkable. One of the problems that we had was we were working with her, and we had an interpreter with us who spoke Himba into English, and he caught malaria and left us. So we managed, as one does, because you can
One
just
must.
be close to someone and you can gather as much as you can what's going on. But we couldn't really ask complex questions to Kachambia, which was a great pity, because she would have probably explained what was going on in more depth.
But we did understand that she was trained in Angola, where some of the greatest and most powerful healers exist today. And that's one of the countries that we want to go to and do further research in. And that she said it's most important to understand the source of the illness, what it's coming from. It may not be that you've picked up a bacteria. It can be much, much deeper, and it can go back generations. So her level of healing is much deeper than putting a Band-Aid over, a scratch. She's
really concerned to understand the history of a situation and goes profoundly deep into the background of an ill person.
Which sounds very similar, Fred, to some of the ceremonies and the healings that you have witnessed, and you'll talk with us again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I hope you can find that next flight to Namibia and write something about right up her life.
We'll let
what are
you
some of
know.
your other
You have the
questions?
answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
we love your
My other
bird.
question that I was thinking was about divination. I've myself in my own fieldwork seen countless 25, 50 kinds of divination, which, I mean, divination is nothing but using one part of the world that we don't associate usually with telling us things and associating that with, integrating that with our lives to know what's going on in the greater panorama of things. It's not magic, it's simply understanding how to read the environment. Have you, was much of that practiced actively? And can you tell us maybe a couple of different forms of divination that you might have seen there?
I've got one that I'd love to tell you. One of our great guides and mentors was Patrice Malidoma Some, who's a quite renowned shaman from West Africa who came to the
Read
United
of
States.
stuff, yeah.
And he gave us a personal divination in Scotland where we spent a week with him. And I have a quote from the email. This was amazing. This came out of the divination. And it was so powerful that I asked him to write it. And he said, I believe that Carol and Angela have responded to an urgent call from the continent's ancestors to record sacred ceremonies before it is too late. Their book, African Ceremonies, has been born from their dedication, and it stands as an enduring statement for future generations, as well as a call to preserve the priceless diversity of Africa's ceremonial life. That came from a throwing of the stones in,
The throwing of the stones.
yes, of stones and metal pieces. There were about 100 different pieces thrown on a hide over and over in different configurations.
And was it deliberate, or did they just come out in kind of random configurations and then he was able to read them?
Random configurations,
And then he read it
numerous
from that.
times over.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever see any instances of like people reading like the positions of a crow in a tree, to the left or the right, or anything like that to say what was, to be able to read a situation? Or like a
Well,
dog barking at a certain time in the night or anything like that?
many pastoral societies read the configuration of the intestines of an animal that's being slaughtered. And it's usually a ceremonial slaughter for an initiation or for an age passage. But all the elders come together and have hour-long debates about the future of the community and where threats are coming from a specific divination of the intestinal organs.
I mean, this is all interesting to me. It just seems to me, having studied this stuff forever, that a lot of what we see, for example, in your work there, Laura and Paul, that that the way certain drawings or diagrams or paintings are on ancient or even, let's say, Mesoamerican or South American Incan pots are actually kinds of divination. What's an ant doing there? What's a tapir doing there? What are these different animals? Why are these things constructed in this way? I don't know if we were able to read such things, but maybe from the very, very opulent African art, maybe you can see something about the way that they read nature into their own lives through their depictions of it, either through dance, like the lion spirit, or through the artistic forms. I mean, it's something I know
And then what
very
the symbols mean,
Yeah.
right?
what
There's
they
their stories
mean.
behind them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at
We have
the,
a lot to talk about, Fred.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the crux of the question is the encoding of spirit, encoding of knowledge within that particular piece of
How do
art,
we
sculpture.
decode it?
Everything is specific for a reason. What and how, and it's a way to carry that message forward.
And Kelly, you've worked with eco-spirituality or a psychotherapist. You've delved into some of this. Do you have some
Additional comments?
additional comments on this?
Well, I kind of moved from that place of being in the midst of and feeling into, as opposed to having to know all of the answers. Like I show desire to show up present for the spirits
Yeah.
to speak into me in a
Mhm.
way, whether that's through dance or through art or just through being in nature and
Keeping your
seeing what
ears open.
yeah, and seeing what
And
arises.
heart.
Like I don't have a formula.
Mhm.
I don't have a formula, but I ask to be a hollow bone, in the process.
I think the first step of any formula is show up and open up, right? And
Yeah,
ask, be present,
Yeah, yeah.
initiate the dialogue. Yeah.
exactly. And to listen deeply and just move
Something we all can do.
Yeah.
from that
We look
space.
we look
Yeah.
forward to our discussion with you, Fred. Thank you very much for. I know, like you said, you have another 100
Can we
questions.
ask Fred about his bird?
Oh
What's
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
So
Tell us the story of
fascinated by your
Papagano,
Papageno.
bird.
Papagano.
So,
His,
Beautiful
well,
word.
his name is Papageno. He can sing some Mozart opera arias, and he's been with me for 36 years. And we've established a kind of an ambiance. We're kind of a bonded pair.
you are.
It's amazing.
He's
Could he
so
sing a few lines for us?
Papageno, what are you gonna? I think he just wants to sort of sit here and watch what's going on screen.
An observer.
A
When we
white
got
spirit.
when we got to visit Papageno in person, he left us a beautiful, vibrant green feather on the desk.
Oh yeah,
Remember me? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
We
so
broadcast from Fred's
beautiful.
house. Yeah, yeah,
Is he
yeah,
from South America?
Yeah, yeah. Yellow naped Amazon. Yeah.
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 Beautiful. What a beautiful bird.
yeah.
He looks so happy with you.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
Oh,
look like a
Oh,
dinka
look
man
at
bonded to
oh.
his animal, his namesake ox.
there's the yellow nape. You can see.
Sliding down your arm out of sight.
He
Well,
knows we're
he
talking
knows
about
that
him. He's a little
he knows that
shy.
he's been
Yeah.
talked about. That's right.
Let's talk about that animal human bond and how
That's it.
extraordinary the
Yeah.
Dinka are. Talk about cattle whisperers. Talk about that. I mean, to
Yeah.
to have that very sacred bond with an animal. Can you tell us more stories on that?
Yeah.
One of the things that comes to mind is that the Dinka believe that their cattle are the pathway to God. And the Dinka really are totally reliant on their animals. I mean, they drink the milk of these animals, they sleep on the hides of these animals, they have everything that is their life is also involving cattle. And what's so wonderful is that when you see a Dinka man herding his animal, it's not like there's a man following his ox or his cattle out to pasture, but he's walking right beside the animals and he will walk from one to another and imitate their different shaped horns. So he's forming this ambiotic relationship with them all the time. He's honoring the relationship. And when they come in to graze at night, there's 2,000 head of cattle and they all know where to walk. They all have a tethering post. So they all walk quietly to their tethering post. And then the Dinka spend probably an hour and a half rubbing ash into their bodies so that it protects them from tsetse flies and from mosquitoes. So their animals are just going through their own personal massage after sunset. I mean, it is so adorable. And they even take the Dinka are very, very aware of their beautiful bodies. They're between 6'6" and 7'6", the Dinka. They're the tallest race in Africa. And they decorate their bodies, and they also at the same time will decorate the horns of their namesake ox with tassels, or it really is a dual relationship. And I think what Carol and I found so amazing is that there's always room and there's a peacefulness so that you are there with your animals, and there's a sharing quality. And every morning when we would wake up, there would be a calabash of milk from one of the animals left beside the tent, just as it's such a fabulous community.
If you give a gift of a bar of salt to a Dinka man, you're by yourself with him. He takes his knife out and he cuts it into 17 little squares because he's sharing it with everyone in the community.
Oh,
So that lovely egalitarian sense of what's mine is yours is really deeply moving with the Dinka.
For you to describe that deep, deep honoring relationship makes me go back to the painted caves of, say, Lascaux. Everybody knows that. And to see these magnificent cattle and aurochs and the bison painted there with such reverence and beauty and intimate knowledge of their form, their shape, their color, which just, you wonder, did they have, they weren't domesticated, as we understand, but just to honor it, just to have that relationship of co-equals, to understand the majesty, the beauty, the power, the superpowers of the animals, you have to wonder if we could go back to all of life is sacred, all of life is sacred. We are a member of the web of life, co-equals on that, and then that being expressed this way, you have to wonder from those deep, deep roots from whence we came.
Absolutely.
20, 30, 40,000 years ago. What was that relationship with nature? We need to understand how puny we are, right? How we don't have the fangs and the claws and the, I mean, we have the brains, we have the hands, but
What's
it just,
fascinating is you can learn a lot about a culture by looking at its language. The Maasai have probably, and the Dinka, probably have 30 or 40 different words that we've never even heard of for the tiny nuances of colors of their cattle, or the way the formation of the hairs. I mean, it just phenomenal detail. And if you look at any lexique on a nomadic society, you immediately know where their values lie. Because the
yeah.
majority of words and the absence of some words and the presence of new words really give you a sense of the value structure of a society.
Yeah.
And how much animals can be in communication with us. I'm reminded of the story of a Native American told us of walking along a path in the woods in a narrow ledge, and there's a bear. And having to speak in his native language and say, "Hello, Sir Bear, may we pass safely? We honor you." And the bear walking aside, they pass and the bear goes on. I mean, so this extraordinary communication between species and between us and many other species, I'm reminded of my octopus teacher,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
How if we show up with honor, with reverence, with patience, with an open mind and heart, the communications that can take place, the expansion of our bandwidth,
That's the point.
right?
Yeah.
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 So
Fred, do you have a lot of communication with your bird? Can he understand what you're saying?
Yes, he does have a, yes, you know, yes, certainly he understands what I'm saying. And not all the time, of course, because, you know, human speech can be very,
confusing for all of us.
confusing for all of us. And there's lots of different languages, for example, that I've learned and that kind of thing. But there's,
Parrots are
yeah,
noted for their intelligence.
but
and
see,
their
the thing is
vocabularies.
that a bird, the eyesight is so acute and sharp. They can see stuff off both ends of this color spectrum that we can't see. And, you know, like a dog with a sense of smell, they can, I mean, we talk about our intelligence, but their intelligence is way different and no less than ours. There's a book called "Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?" across the world.
Good title.
And the
I'm
answer
gonna
is
invite
most
that
of the
one.
time we're not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the short answer.
More when we sit down with you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you,
Thank
Fred.
you, Papageno.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have Marina,
Yeah,
who's
Marina.
also a fan of your work
Yeah.
and is telling us she too owns your books. Hi,
Yeah.
Marina.
Yes, Marina.
Hey, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Oh, it's
Hi.
this session is so mind blowing. My heart is beating. I cried during the watching some of the videos. I was taken back to Africa. I'm just so grateful for the gifts that you brought, for the work that you've done to hold what would be extinct. And as you said, 40% has gone, but as Laura keeps saying, it's still in our hearts, it's still in our blueprint, you know, and it's still in our bandwidth. So I'm really, really grateful for that. My question was whether you took part in any of the rituals and had any of those extraordinary experiences.
Good question.
And I'm speaking from the point of view of having studied with Malidoma for many, many years.
Oh.
I've been to the village in Burkina Faso. I've been initiated into the Akan system, and having taken part in rituals, you know, I've experienced very non-Western experiences. Let's put it this way. And I say that from the point of view that we are socialized and programmed into a lot of left brain thinking. And my experience and my understanding is that a lot of this, a lot of indigenous work, including Laura and Paul's work, is about awakening and softening the right brain, and really utilizing that faculty of the imagination and entering the imaginal realm. There is a realm that is imaginal, you know, and I feel that our indigenous sisters and brothers deal very much with the archetypes and you know, just looking at the boy with the cow and listening to Fred talking about animal communication, you know, there is something about shape shifting and communicating at a deep level with the animals, so that you're not, and you know, it's in the medicine wheel of so many indigenous cultures that we connect with animal spirits, not from the point of view of what they have to teach us and you know, what they have to awaken in our networks. So I was just shaking throughout that, you know, thinking there's so much here. So I'd really like to know if you've entered any of those rituals and give us an example of an experience.
Beautiful question.
That you might have had.
I think there's always a conflict between getting completely involved and stepping outside to record it. And I have to say, many times we're really caught in that conflict. But when we were working in Togo and Benin, we were initiated into the Sakpata cult of Vodun. And we didn't have enough time to spend really taking the months and months it would require for a full initiation. But we had the beginning parts of initiation, which involved blessings and being completely painted with white spots because
The guinea fowl?
that's no, the smallpox. Sorry, it translates to smallpox. It's a cult that came about at a time when smallpox was a very deathly issue in that society, and a very powerful cult was developed of healers that were able to overcome that curse on the village. And they're quite a big cult of followers. We spent a lot of time with the chief priestess, and she showed us a lot of the medicinal sort of drawings that she would do with white powders, which are like the food of the gods, to create blessings and protection. I'm not describing it as deeply as I'd like to, but I can send you notes from the journal because it was about 20 years ago, and could send you drawings and photographs. How would that be?
Wow, that would be
Towards
fantastic.
answering.
Yes, yes. I was just thinking of, you know, Edith Turner and her experiences, just observing rituals, you know, and seeing, beginning to see in the way that the people around her were seeing. Yeah.
We've had some interesting experiences where to record a ceremony, you go through situations that you wouldn't normally go through, thinking that you're a photographer. With the Maasai in the early days, we had to be covered in ochre before we could go into the sacred forest where they get painted. But after we'd been covered with ochre, we were then asked to join a line of warriors, which was quite long, probably about 200 in all. And that line was going up to a sacred ox that had been slaughtered, and they cut the dewlap of the ox and open it up, and then your view is just blood, which they add milk and honey to. But each warrior had to come in and drink. You have to put your head into the dewlap of the ox and drink from it. And Carol and I were standing there thinking, can we really do this? And then we thought, no, we have to. I mean, you have to do it. And we were so pleasantly surprised, because once your head is in the dewlap of the ox and you take your mouthful of this blood and honey mixture, it was really quite delicious. And we realized that
we thought it tastes like roast beef gravy. Where are we?
it was all the things that one feels that might be difficult in life often are much easier than you believed. And the other thing was that it made you realize what these ceremonies are like, because these ceremonies of passage from one stage of life to another, you belong to an age grade system. And what's wonderful is that all these warriors that do 7 days of this kind of ritual together and go and paint their bodies so that their mothers don't recognize them, etc., all the things that they do together are part of an age community. And when you become elders, you'll be that same age community. So you've got all these activities that are building you closer and closer and closer as male companions, completely separate to your family and completely separate to your wife or husband or whatever. It's a sobering thought, because you realize that maybe going through age grade systems, you have a tremendous security in life. You have that reference, you have that amount of support, that amount of camaraderie, and things like this have made us also question our own life in the Western world.
Yeah.
My siblings and I were just talking about how the four of us know each other to a depth that nobody ever else will, because we have that shared childhood, right? We have the shared influence of the parents and the upbringing. We know each other in a way nobody else will do that. And how you're talking about it on a community-wide level, how powerful that must be.
Yeah.
A whole community that you've grown up with, that you advance from youth to young men to elders with.
Yeah.
And
well, it kind of comes back to what Dr. Goodman talked about, and that is that she's in Western culture. We keep thinking we're going to create these ideal societies, and we go build a bunch of houses in a circle, and we say we're going to share a garden. He says they almost always fail. They don't always maintain themselves, because there has to be a shared experience. There has to be something deeper that connects
on
us
a soul level.
On a soul level, and that's what when we talk about tribe, when we talk about cultural knowledge.
We get so
imbibed.
few tastes of that in our culture because we're so mobile. Yeah. So, what did it feel like to wear ochre on your skin? What did that feel like?
Oh, it's lovely. It's like putting a rather diaphanous blouse on. It's lovely. It's cool. It protects you from the sun. It keeps the tsetse flies or the mosquitoes away, and it also makes you feel aligned with people who are using paint and designs for their ethnic identity. Like every group has their own kind of designing. Wadabe have designs where if you meet a Wadabe hundreds of miles away, you automatically know that's a Wadabe woman, whether it's scarification, tattooing, or body paint. And it's sort of, we don't have that in our society. Maybe we wear lipstick, but it's not enough.
We rely on clothing for those signals, but not body
It's
paint.
lovely to be able to.
In Voices of the First Day about the Australian Aborigine, Robert Lawler posits, he suggests that coating oneself in iron-rich clay, which is ochre, tunes one to Mother Earth's iron core, to the magnetic field that you're now, not just the blood in your veins, but the ochre on your skin is tuning you to Mother Earth in deeper ways. Did you feel any sense of that?
When you say it, I want to feel it immediately, and I think maybe I have.
Yeah.
I also feel when you look at groups of people that use ochre, like the Maasai and the Himba, I mean, perfect examples. It's costly to have ochre. It costs them money to have it, but it's sort of such a special body makeup. And when you see a group of Himba women ochred, you think they look like walking bronzes. They're so beautiful.
Ah,
And actually covering your body with an all body makeup makes you look so extraordinary. And the one thing that really had attracted me in the beginning to the Maasai of the Serengeti was these beautiful bodies, but they're ochred. They're ochred and beaded. And you think to yourself, these people have got such a wonderful conception of how to make yourself beautiful in a difficult environment. I mean, for us to maintain our beauty in the middle of the bush isn't easy, but they do. And somehow they look so good that you feel in yourself, we feel like second-rate citizens. You know, they're really stunning. And the more remote you go, the more beautiful people turn up, and they manage to maintain that kind of beauty every day. You know, the beads, and they just, I mean, the Turkana girl who is ready for marriage with beads from her chest to her chin, she's going to wear that kind of beaded jewelry every day.
Every day.
For a period. And you think, what an extraordinary amount of attention to detail, and what an extraordinary amount of knowledge about how to make your body look its best possible. It is,
And to show up in life like that. And also, it's egalitarian. For us, we have so much cosmetic surgery to make yourself look a certain way. There, it's what you can adorn yourself with is the standard of beauty, right?
And
That's
even
egalitarian. Anybody can do that.
It's permanent adornment. It's, those necklaces are put on permanently. They're only taken off if a person is changing stage in life with the Dinka. But that's switched on, and he wears it full time. And the Maasai wear their bracelets full time. These are full time. They just they come on. Maybe they drop off after 4 or 5 months. But you can swim, you can bathe, you can do whatever.
Everything, shower, everything in them. Wow.
I also love the
closer to our Maasai friends.
and I also love the fact that men fully adorn themselves.
Yes.
I mean, for me to put on a necklace, this is radical in our culture, a guy with a necklace on. But, that the power of what we saw in that imagery, it's like, I'm ready to go back to the Institute and let's do a body painting workshop where we all get to just pull out the mud and see what we can come up with. And
you look in nature, and it's the male of the species that has the most elaborate and colorful feathers. You go to Santa Fe, and all the men are wearing tons of jewelry, and it looks good.
That's true.
In Santa Fe.
Pueblo people, the Pueblo people do that. You're right.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, Marina, thank you so much for jumping in. Where in the world are you? I forgot. Where is your home?
I'm in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm in Brighton, south of England.
We're in London. Can we meet you?
Oh, I'd love to meet you. And I'm wondering if the exhibition is due, if your Twilight exhibition is due to happen in England at all.
Not yet, but we hope so. But we'd love to get together with you. Can we do that?
And Kelly's got an invitation.
Wonderful.
We must come.
Yes.
Let's have
thank you.
Right over. Right over for tea.
I'll give them your email.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you so much.
That
would be
and Kelly
wonderful.
too.
And Kelly.
it would be
We want you to
lovely
be in touch with Kelly as well.
Yes.
We'd also love to hear about your experiences.
I think we should have another Zoom visit too. Bring your stories, bring your
I'd like to
charts
have
and your
more
diagrams.
discussions,
Kelly's got plenty
Marina.
more to share.
With Kelly as well.
I'll invite Louise and some other people with these experiences and observations.
The one thing, coming back to our conversation with Kelly, and she said, there's this concept nowadays of what we refer to as white privilege. And she said, it's great when you use your white privilege for good causes. We can come together and use it like you two have done, that you've had that advantage of being white privilege, but you took it back and used it in such a powerful way. So that was really inspiring, Kelly, when you brought that to our attention.
Yeah, we want to put that on record, Kelly,
Yeah,
because that made us feel good.
Yeah. So we're trying our hardest to take advantage of our white privilege and participate as well.
Yeah, it's important, and you know, these women, what you all have done is the epitome of white privilege. You use that your privilege, your connection, and your ability to activate what your parents dropped into your spirit and use that to propel you into places where sometimes you were in danger, sometimes you were just on the edge of complete
Yeah.
mystery, and you did it. You never turned around, and you left something good. You left something good. I
And
mean, and
gifted
that's
the
what
culture back as
Yeah.
well.
gifted it back, right? Whether it was a well or a school or a project where people are embroidering,
Yeah.
but it's just been such a symbiotic relationship. And if I can help to spread African Twilight to everywhere, I will do anything and
Oh,
everything that I
thank
can
you.
to share this volume.
We
Yeah.
really feel like we found a kindred spirit in you, Kelly. We
Yeah.
feel
Oh,
so
Us
close
too.
to you.
Yeah.
We ordered your book. We've been reading it out loud. I mean, we just have you with us, even
oh,
though we're
Yeah.
miles apart. But we love you so much.
oh, I love you both so much, and I'm so honored. I never imagined that when I was gifted your work, that I would have an opportunity to sit with you all and hear your stories and see your faces and to have a real connection.
Well,
So,
we're gonna.
And bringing those values forward, those very values, that relationship with oneself and our environment and our
Right.
universe, to with the ancestors, with the spirits, that is needed to go forward, right? If we're going to find our way back, this is what we need to pull forward, right? This is the knowledge and the wisdom and the practices that we need
Yeah. Yeah. And
to find our way home.
Kelly will end with a poem we'd asked her previously. She probably didn't, maybe, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but when we get ready to end, you'll have your poem ready to share with us. That would be fantastic.
In the meantime, I want to say that, Carol and Angela, you have a foundation, African Ceremonies, Inc., and you have seen this mission to preserve the strength, essence, and creativity of African cultures for the history of mankind and for the education of future generations. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I think what is important at the moment is that we, having worked for 45 years, have actually amassed an enormous amount of valuable material on Africa and on the traditional cultures of Africa. And one of our biggest givebacks in our mind is we want to leave it in a way that it can be accessed and it can be used and can be there for future generations. And
Right.
the archive consists of over 500,000 images, really even 750,000 images. It exists with over 1,000 hours of video film, 200 illustrated diaries, and it has 4 traveling museum exhibitions, 4 separate ones. And this is the contents of the archive, and we're looking for a home for it. At the moment, it's safely looked after in London, but we want a home for it, like a museum or a university, to have it where it can be shared and given out in all sorts of form to Africa, can be shared with the outside world. We want it to have a living history, and we're really open. If anyone who's listening to this wonderful program has any ideas as to where they feel it should be, we are very much dedicating quite a bit of our life at the moment to following up on this before we're getting too old and grey and can't make that transition in the way that we'd like to.
I also want to acknowledge Barbara Cox and her platform, her contributions, her expertise. She's the connector of us all here.
Yeah. And she's very humble about it. Yeah.
Yeah, a photo kunst, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's important.
Did every community welcome you? I mean, I get the sense that the elders have come to you and said, please preserve it. You shared one story. Was that true with the majority of the 150 cultures that you visited, the 46 countries, did most say, come, we've been expecting you, come? What kind of a reception did you get? It's not that you were emailing them or writing them ahead of time, you just showed up. How was the typical journey arranged for
It's
you?
different in every single case. Every
Yeah.
single case. I mean, sometimes you meet someone who tells you about their culture and invites you to come home. Sometimes you, I mean, in Ghana, we went to a sort of big public gathering of all the different cultural groups who were performing a dance for the Ministry of Culture. And we found one group, the Krobo, that were really gripped us. And we started to talk to the Krobo girls, and they said, we're having our Krobo initiation coming up in a year. Why don't you come? Come be
Yeah.
with us. And we stayed in touch with them. We were back and forth. We had the days. We met the chief, who was very important to a lot of our field work.
Yeah.
Um, and we even, when we recorded it and published it in African Ceremonies, we even got a call from a wonderful African American woman named Barbara Gaither in Chicago, who said, I am so moved by the coverage of this Krobo initiation from girls to womanhood that I'm proposing to initiate it into the schools of Chicago,
Wow.
where girls are coming from broken families,
Yeah.
families with drug issues, families without the girl knowing their mothers. And she said, I want to bring all these values in, and these girls are going through a Krobo initiation. And it was written up in all the papers. And as far as I know, it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
But
Sounds like
we,
something, Kelly, that you might bring to Cleveland.
Yeah.
so we fell in love with the Krobo, and they helped us with many other ceremonies in Ghana. Um, Chief Macau would invite us back whenever there was anything happening at all, because we've been there 16 times, and the medicine in his pouch keeps pulling us back. Um, but I think also we have friends that know what we're doing and will sometimes call. Like our very close friend was the one that called from Tanzania, said, this Maasai ceremony is happening in 48 hours. It's once every 14 years. Get here.
Yeah.
I will be ready for you. I'll help you. It's so many different lovely, unexpected, serendipitous introductions, and they all require a lot of work in getting it ready. And I
Yeah.
have to say that the trips are very, once you decide where you're going, it's only the beginning, because you usually have to go through the government of the country with endless applications and forms and this and that and the other. And when you actually get to the remote corner of the country, no one has ever heard of you, and you start from scratch again. You
Yeah.
spend hours with the elders under an acacia tree. You don't take your cameras out. You get to know them, they get to know you. And
Mhm.
eventually, if you're lucky, they welcome you to the ceremony.
Yeah.
So there are endless stages that are quite separate one from the other. You haven't achieved it just because the government gave you a permit to photograph.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait for your memoirs.
Yeah. Julie's saying, come to New Orleans. We celebrate many ways of the ancestors, huge museum with all your collections, and black masking Indians are very traditional and complex there.
Oh, yeah.
So she's and she also said, the more I travel, the more I see how cultures overlap in abundant ways. Then we speak with the animals and the plants and are one with all beating hearts. So that was a nice comment. Yeah.
We wanted, and we wanted not to forget one thing that we want to share with you, and
Yeah.
that is during COVID, we had
Mm.
an invitation from the University of Würzburg
Through Barbara Cox.
through Barbara Cox,
Of course.
created the entire connection to do an Africa Online Museum for students worldwide, free of
Oh,
charge,
Oh, yeah.
going initially into 40 universities through Würzburg. And we worked on it for 2 solid years. And it covers, we have a lot more to go, but it covers 22 cultures. And you see still images, essays, descriptions, video films. And Würzburg contributed music because they have the most famous African music festival in Europe. And all the top musicians come, and they put the music component into it. And it's Africa Online, one word.org, and it's available to everyone. And we're so happy with it. And it's been a great educational resource and tool. And we'd love you to enjoy it or look at it or
Absolutely.
more information on what we've shown in our presentation today through
Thank
the
you.
online
Africa.
video.
Thank you. I have one last question for both of you, and that is that we have prescribed ceremonies and rituals, and we have spontaneous ceremonies and rituals. We do both. And I wanted to know and hear from you, Kelly, as well, but did you see a lot of spontaneous rituals or only prescribed rituals? Because it seems to me when you have a ritual language, when you have ritual tools around you, maybe that is a way as needs come up or visions come up or something come up that you're always in a formal language with the spirits and the ancestors. That is a language to communicate with that realm, is through ritual, through gesture, through the tools. And it helps to focus and open our hearts and the dialogue. Did you see much of that? Because I am just here to advocate for both in our world, that we can also pick that up and do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think things are coming up all the time. I mean, we have, in Recording Africa, had some research to find the big ceremonies, like the Dharma Dogon ceremony. That's a collective ceremony which happens every 12 years. And all the people that have died in the last 12 years have their spirits sent up into the afterworld to join the ancestors. Because, for instance, you're not an ancestor till you are accepted into the ancestral realm. Just because you've died doesn't make you an ancestor. You can be an ancestor, you can be a person who's died and have a spirit in the village that's quite troublesome till you get sent up into the afterworld.
Makes
But
sense.
in answering this, I think a lot goes on, and we've often gone to do one particular thing like the Dogon Dharma ceremony and found that it's running 6 weeks late, which of course is nothing for the Dogon, but for us, 6 weeks was 6 weeks. So Carol and I'd say, okay, let's just go off and see what's happening. And the great thing is, things are happening all the time because they're living their lives. And, you know, you find weddings, of course, and you have these wonderful sonrai hairstyles, you know, being redone after they came from the 16th century just to, you know, be part of a wedding today. And then we went down and drove from Mali down to Ghana, and we found, as we were going through the border post, we had this extraordinary thing being towed in front of us. And we thought, this is a lion. It's a huge lion. And it was about 6'6" by about 4 foot.
In wood.
Painted. And painted. So we decided we'd follow the lion. So we're driving around, we're following the lion. It comes to sort of dark, and the lion gets to a village and it pulls up. And we said, what is happening here? And they said, oh, we're bringing a lion coffin to a hunter who's recently died, and his family, who are Ga in origin, from the Ga people, wanted to send him into the afterworld in a coffin that depicted his profession in life. And so Carol and I then said, well, we'd love to photograph the funeral if you're doing one. And then a week later, we left the village and we'd photographed the funeral of the Ga coffin. And we'd learned a lot about coffins, and we got taken back to the maker of the coffin. And so things are happening all the time. And we've never had a moment in Africa where you sit and think, oh my God, you know, we're just sort of twiddling our thumbs. And on a personal level, you have personal libations and personal visits to the soothsayer, where somebody will want to inquire about a sick child, or somebody will decide that they want to actually even think about what is the best season for the community to plant. And they'll go, before cultivation, they'll go to the soothsayer, and they will ask him, could he contact the spirits and find out when we should be planting. So there's a lot that's happening all the time. And we often feel that you need to be in Africa for a long period of time. But then we understand also that many people who visit Africa really think of going to see Africa as going to see wildlife and wonderful wildlife reserves. And we sometimes think, wouldn't it be great if they would go beyond the wildlife reserve and into the traditional cultures? Because that's a step further into Africa.
Right.
And it's understanding the animals is extraordinary because they're the most extraordinary animals. But then there are the human beings, and we, as Carol sometimes says, we all were born, we all originated in Africa. Human species originated in Africa.
Yeah.
And it is our homeland. And
It is
it's
our home.
definitely African American homeland, but it's our homeland. All of us really
Human.
share this cultural heritage.
We're a
And
branch on one big tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
So for me, spontaneous rituals often happen when I'm out in nature drumming and feeling the rhythm of nature, that I can find myself in a trance, that I take myself into a trance through that rhythm of breath and drum and nature, and let myself go to wherever I need to go for the healing that I need, or for what I need to bring back to the community, my family, or the clients that I'm working with. So it's always a yes to the benevolent ancestors, right? Because not everybody that died is a good ancestor. That is so true. Um, yeah, so it happens for me often spontaneously, and I have had opportunity to be in ritual, mostly voodoo and Santeria, and it's always powerful, and it's like a giving over. And I would say a feeling like being the wind,
Yeah.
and just allowing what needs to come through. And sometimes it's like a washing away,
Yeah.
so that I can just come back clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
clear.
it's lovely.
Beautifully.
We
And
ever
my-
join you on one of these occasions?
Absolutely. Yes.
You
We could all
will.
go to the Institute.
Yes, we'll create ritual. We'll create ritual together. We need it. We need more ritual.
Absolutely.
Malidoma Some used to say to us, when you start a ritual, you own it and you control it. And when you enter the ritual, it owns you.
It does. It does.
Because
Sometimes someone has to bring you
guided.
back. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
being guided.
Yeah.
I also, you quoted him on saying the difference between a performance, say, of music and a ritual with music is the performance is prescribed, beginning, middle, and end, the agenda set. With ritual, you enter in and something else is guiding you, right? And it's over when it's over. It is guiding you. You're listening to to some other conductor.
All
Yeah.
right.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. This has gone over time, and I want to thank you
Final
all
question.
for that.
Final
Yes,
question.
yes.
Just it also leads into next week's discussion, so it's a little bit.
And by the way, you'll have plenty of coincidence and synchronistic stories if you want to join us, and a few ghost stories on Halloween.
Well, that's what Brian was asking the two, saying,
Yeah.
how did you both understand the tremendous serendipity of your experiences? What role has synchronicity and the ability to be open to the mysteries have had in helping you with your work? The work you are both doing has been a blessing for our world.
I wish, Brian, you would turn on your mic and camera and say it yourself.
Okay,
Yes.
real quickly.
You said it perfectly. That's exactly
No, you're
the
so
way I
eloquent.
said
Go
it.
ahead.
Well, just to again affirm the blessing of this work, and I'm just so moved. And you've spoken a lot about serendipity and synchronicity, but the way, and Kelly, your voice, along with Angela and Carol, I mean, this is just the richness of a documentary film. And your life stories are also a lovely backdrop to the work that you're doing. But I'm just fascinated by the sense of wonder and the allurement that's within you that you have followed, and the fact in some ways it's been almost an answer to a prayer. I just wonder how you think about that and how you experience that.
I think exactly as you described it. We believe in serendipity. We feel we've been blessed, and we feel the more, you take a step forward and it's very tentative and it's scary. And then you take a bigger step and a bigger step, and suddenly you're leaping. And
Yeah.
it feels like we've gotten to a point where we have the blessing and the serendipity to leap into what we're doing, to leap and capture and share. And what greater gift could one be given than those three qualities?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kelly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna just share a short poem.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank
I
you.
may begin by saying I linger in the space cultivated by the wisdom of my ancestors. I live in hopefulness Despite my fear, I pray for lightness, a releasing of the worry of my brown children being hurt in a society that often fears Blackness and looks for ways to erase those who are sun-kissed hues. We too are human. We too are light in the dark. May we be light. May we find lightness. May we follow the guidance of our ancestors.
Oh, what a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Kelly.
You
Thank
know, when we are
Angela.
truly on our hero journey, right? We've truly been catapulted out on the path and we're on it. I think we find that there is a larger hand than just ourselves who are writing our stories, who are opening our doors, who are pointing the way. And and it's so beautiful to hear of the journeys of others and see that larger hand at work that we all share. So thank you all for
Thank
this
you,
time
London.
together.
Thank you
Would you
too
like
so
to
much.
say anything we
Thank
can-
you, thank you, thank you.
I think everyone's saying thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Ashe Olin, the Maasai, thank you.
Yeah, Angela and Carol, thank you so much, and of course,
Yeah.
Kelly, and thank you all for being here today. The way that we like to end is turning on the microphones and saying everybody gets to say thank you, not just Laura and I. So take a moment to speak up and let them know how much you appreciate what you heard today.
And saw today.
Yeah, and saw. Can you? Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Ooh, amazing. Thank you. Wonderful. Inspiring. Thank you.